So the Cowboys are going to play week number 1 of the NFL season this Sunday against one of their historic rivals, the Cleveland Browns. And I think that that's something that probably sounds a little bit odd to a lot of people, especially younger fans.
This is Choppy's childhood team.
That's right.
Not the Jets.
Nope, the Browns.
No, the Jets were awful.
My dad was a huge Browns fan. He loved Jim Brown, so he became a Browns fan.
Yeah, because he's a guy,
right? He was. I think.
That's why Jim Brown loved him.
Right, maybe. So he loved the Browns. So I mean, this whole from Brian Sipe to Bernie Kosar, Bud Carson. What an awful coach he was. Marty Ball.
Lot of pain that you grew up around then with those 80s Browns teams. But it does seem odd at this point to look at it and say they've got like a deep history with each other. The Cowboys and Browns played each other 19 times in the first decade of the Cowboys' existence. There was no team they played more than the Browns in the first 10 years of the franchise's existence. Since that time, they've played 13 times in the 55 years since. So this will be game number 14 in the last 55 years after they went the first 10 years. Pretty much, a little bit after. And so it was one of those things where they were in the same division for a number of years. They met each other in the playoffs 3 years in a row. So there's actually like a lot of deep history there. And the first big pivotal moment in Cowboys Browns history is going to be of special interest to RJ Choppy. When the Cowboys traveled to Cleveland on November 24th, 1963.
Oh, man.
Why is that pivotal?
1963.
November 24th, 1963.
That was Jim Brown's last game.
No. This was
Leroy Kelly.
2 days after Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas.
Duh.
And the Cowboys, by all accounts, were trying. Getting it stuck. Cowboys were trying to kind of lobby like privately, like, please don't make us play football. Like, don't make us go on the road right after. So Cleveland was about as deep Kennedy support as you were going to find in the state of Ohio at the time. 10 counties in Ohio in 1960 voted for JFK. He won Cuyahoga County by over 140,000 votes. He won the other 9 counties in Ohio by a combined 64,000 votes.
Oh, wow.
Which means this was as Kennedy supporting as you can get outside of the state of Massachusetts. And the Cowboys traveled out there, and History.com actually wrote about this a couple of years ago about their trip to Cleveland and how when they pulled up to the stadium, they had to carry when they pulled up to the hotel, they had to carry their own bags, and the bellhops turned their backs to the Cowboys players.
Yeah, what kind of loser do you have to be to blame, to even remotely place any blame or anger towards people who a football player who had nothing to do with that? What kind of absolute loser do you have to be?
It was something that was held like against the city at the time. Pettis Norman, who was the Cowboys tight end, said they took the field that day and they were hearing all day from what was not a capacity crowd. This game was played at the same time as the JFK funeral was going on in D.C. And they took the field, and Pettis Norman said the entire game they were hearing nothing but murderers, killers, you killed the president.
Oh, my.
Just aggressive. And
hell is the matter with people?
Eddie LeBaron, the Cowboys' backup quarterback, had told everybody, he was a veteran, he told everybody, he's like, do not take your helmets off today. He's like, don't take them off. Don't let them see your face. Don't take that protection off your head, because as soon as that comes off, somebody is throwing a beer bottle at your head. Like, somebody's coming for you. And it was just a hostile, and that was the rest of the season. Gil Brandt talked about it years later, but that first game in Cleveland was about as bad of a road trip, like city, they could have taken in the wake of that as possible. Another game that was pretty significant, December 24th, 1967, Christmas Eve. This was Dallas just destroying Cleveland in the playoffs, 52-14. Why is this significant? Well, because at the time, Cleveland and Green Bay were kind of competing as the team of the last 15 years or so. They both had 4 titles at the time, and this would have been an opportunity for the Browns to go on and play the Packers in what became the Ice Bowl. Cleveland, like years later, a lot of the players talked about how if we would have gone up to there, we're built to play in that weather. We were prepared. We'd been doing it all year. We would have been able to handle Green Bay. And Cleveland would have potentially been able to get to the Super Bowl, win another title, and the team of the decade, the team of the 50s and 60s, could look wildly different. It could look more like Cleveland is who we're talking about, and Cleveland would have had potentially their first Super Bowl after that. So a lot of players were held this beat down at the hands of the Cowboys really personally from Cleveland. December 10th, 1994. This is Bill Belichick and Nick Saban coming to town with the Cleveland Browns, and
Antonio Langham.
This completely changed the trajectory of the 94 playoffs because Dallas loses this game 19-14. They're down 16-14 with 3 minutes left. Aikman fumbles a snap on 4th and 1. Cleveland collects it, kicks a field goal. When Kevin Williams returns the kick to midfield, they hit Alvin Harper. Last play of the game, they throw it to Jay Novacek, and he slips on the turf right in front of the goal line and gets a touchdown, and they lose. And if they win this game, they're likely in the driver's seat to get home field advantage throughout the playoffs. They lose it on this game, and that's when San Francisco took hold of it. That was the 94 NFC Championship game in San Francisco that a lot of people felt like whoever was going to be at home for that game was going to win it and was going to have that advantage. And so Cleveland, Saban, Belichick coming in here, a lot of good luck down the stretch, kind of shifted the trajectory of what the Cowboys dynasty could have been. We would have been looking potentially at 3 in a row if that's a little different.
That was and Bernie was already here, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
He had already been cut by Bill like that earlier that season, or the season before, I guess. And that was he was already here.
Yep. One more, November 6th, 2016. This is the game that ended Tony Romo's career in Dallas. It was actually the week before Dak had struggled for much of the primetime game against the Eagles. He has a great fourth quarter, sends it into overtime, has like magician moments in overtime. They win the game, and Jerry was really impressed, talked about after the game how he rallied and how he battled. Well, this following week, Dak played the best game of his career at that point. He went 21-27, 247, 3 touchdowns, no picks. His passer rating was 141.8, best of his career at that point. About 10 days later is when Tony actually stood up at the podium and said, Dak has earned the right to be our quarterback. But fun fact that maybe a lot of people don't know, after this game is when they made the decision internally that it was going to stay with Dak. And so got a lot of history here. The JFK game, Belichick and Saban changing the course of the 90s Cowboys, and then Dak Prescott solidifying the job.